My wife and I have been house shopping for several months now, so it has become a normal weekend tradition for us to meet up with our realtor and walk through houses. This past Saturday, a place popped up that was in a nice area and for a decent price, so we decided to see it the following day. We drove out to this place and met up with our realtor at about 10 a.m. on Sunday. We started our walkthrough, and as soon as we walked in, it was obvious that the place had been inhabited by elderly people. Not only were there dated wallpaper and color choices, but there was also a stair chair, those powered chairs on a track leading to the basement. We walked through the kitchen and bedrooms, and everything seemed pretty decent. We then came to a room that appeared to be an old craft room with built-in shelving and a desk. This comes into play later. Once we'd seen all the first floor, we decided to check the basement out. It's important to know that the lights in the basement did not turn on. I think there may have been some breakers flipped because some other room lights didn't work either. The basement layout is such that once you descend the stairs, you must either go left or right. Left leads into an older finished portion of the basement, and right leads to an unfinished utility area. The realtor, my wife, and I all go to the right initially. I'm checking out the water softener system and the shelving and storage when my wife decides to go check out the finished portion. After a second, I hear her commenting about how she could not go in that room. I chuckled to myself, assuming she was just being cheeky because it was a dark old room. The realtor decided she would go check it out, but immediately turned around and made a similar comment. I was amused because I just assumed they were playing off of each other and getting freaked out because it was a dark, creepy room. Armed with my phone flashlight turned up as bright as it would go, I decided I would check out the rooms since they didn't want to go in. I walked in confidently, but only made it about a couple of steps before being frozen in my tracks by a paralyzing anxiety. I felt chilled to the core, and I physically tensed up and recoiled at the sensations I was feeling. I felt no apprehensions about going into this room prior to stepping in. Although my wife and realtor had felt uncomfortable going in, I honestly had no reservations. I simply wanted to see the space, but in an instant, I knew I was not welcome in this room. I had stepped into a place occupied by something or someone else, and it and they did not want me there. I looked left and right into the darkness that my phone light could not seem to penetrate save for the small window at the far end of the room, gently glowing from the overcast day outside. I started to feel sick and decided to get out of there quickly. I stepped back out of the room to the base of the stairs and suggested we all head up. As we walked outside to the backyard, we all felt the need to discuss what had just happened. My wife divulged that she actually felt a physical force push on her shoulders as she tried to walk in, as in she literally felt something push her as she tried to enter, which is why she commented about not being able to go in. The realtor seemed to have had a similar experience to mine with extreme anxiety and a feeling of not being welcome. We walked the lot and headed back up to the house to close the shades, turn off the lights, etc. As my wife walked up the stairs, our realtor noticed she had a piece of yellow lace hanging off of her sweater. Normally, this wouldn't be alarming, and admittedly, it's very likely just a result of static cling, but given the experience we had just had, it seemed more sinister. We went back into the house, and our realtor grabbed the piece of lace and left it in the old craft room. We didn't want to take anything from that house home with us. We all left the house, locked up, and talked about it a bit more in the driveway. Later that night, as I lay down for bed, I was in that space between sleeping and waking, and I had a brief dream. I was back in that house, but at night. I stood at the top of those stairs and looked down them when the electric stair chair started to descend by itself. I felt as though I was being baited back into the basement. I woke up pretty quickly, and thankfully didn't dream about it again. I'm obviously open to the paranormal, but I am generally a skeptic. I believe that most things have a reasonable explanation, and this may well have one too. But after reflecting on it for a couple of days, I'll suspend my reasoning and just talk about what I feel. I feel like there were actually two entities in that house, an old man and an old woman, I assume the former residents. The upper floor was her space, and she made it feel welcoming and light. I think she is the reason for the yellow lace on my wife's sweater. I think the basement room was his domain, and he did not appreciate the unannounced company. Not that he meant any harm, but more of a get-out-of-my-house type of reaction. No matter the reality of what actually happened, nor the intentions of any entities there, I don't think we'll be putting in an offer. So this month marks the 1-year point from when this road trip happened. The specific story that I need to tell has made tears run down my face every time I've thought about it, and if I try telling anyone, I start outright sobbing. I don't cry often, but the fear is still so visceral. My brother and I drove out to see our friends in Portland, Oregon from Ohio. The drive there was pretty uneventful. We drove nonstop and made it in a little over 2 days. The only thing that both of us noticed was that on long expanses of country road with no driveways or connecting roads, a car would suddenly be driving behind us. We chalked that part up to being tired and not noticing an approaching vehicle, but within 5 minutes the car would be suddenly gone. We both shouted the first time in unison, and my brother is an ever-logical person who usually calms me down if I think something is off, but he was as freaked out as I was. That first time was within 5 hours of starting our trip, so I don't think it was fatigue. It happened a couple of more times, but eventually we just would point it out and laugh because what else could we do? The scary part was on our drive home. We decided to drive down through California and through the southern states because neither of us had seen the landmarks they're famous for, redwoods, Grand Canyon, etc. We drove the coastal highway, saw the redwoods, and got all the way through San Francisco the first day and into the night. Once out of San Fran, I was driving and my brother turned over to sleep for a couple of hours. No big deal. But my GPS started trying to reroute us. Over and over again, I would click on the coastal highway route and drive for about 10 minutes before it would switch to a different route, and I would notice belatedly. After like an hour of getting turned around in the middle of nowhere over and over again, I decided any route heading to LA would look the same in the dark, so I followed the GPS. It took a solid 10 minutes before I made it to a highway. Cue the tears, I'm literally starting to cry as I write this. At this highway, my GPS told me to turn left, but there was a median and a very clear no left turn sign. Another sign ahead said, Route 1 south with an arrow pointing right. I had originally wanted to take 1 south, so perfect. I turned right. I want to make this very clear. I drove for 2 miles on that highway, maybe 4 because I'm not sure if the exits were every mile or every 2 miles, but 5 minutes. I was on the highway for 5 minutes. I know this because I obsessively check the time. I always have. From the minute I turned right instead of left, my GPS literally started spinning the map. It wouldn't reroute. It didn't make any suggestions. It just stopped all functionality of being a GPS. I was stressed. I didn't recognize any names on the road signs and decided to get off the highway. I passed 1 exit total, got off at the second exit, 5 minutes from where I turned onto the highway. The second I took the exit, my GPS immediately rerouted me. A car took the exit behind me and made the same first turn as I did, and the next, and the next. The GPS took me through pitch-black country roads, on, and all the while, the headlights of the car behind blared into my rearview mirror. After about 15 minutes, tears started rolling down my cheeks. I was scared every time we came to a stop sign. I thought that we were going to be killed. Irrational maybe, but that's what I was thinking. I was just plain scared. 45 minutes. This car followed behind us for 45 minutes. I was trying to be calm and rational. I let my brother sleep. I thought maybe I was being stupid and this was actually a well-known route through California. 45 minutes, and I saw a streetlight finally at the stop sign ahead. I prayed that there was a gas station or convenience store or anywhere populated. But do you want to know what was at that stop sign? The turn on for the highway, the one with the median, with the no left turn sign. The exact same spot I had been at almost an hour before. Again, I was on the highway for 5 minutes before exiting. I followed the GPS from the second I exited, and 45 minutes later, I was at that same turn-on point. I rolled to a stop, and when I looked in my rearview mirror for the 1,000th time, the headlights of the car following me were gone. I instantly burst into terrified tears and took the left turn. Over the median, my brother woke up, sat up, and started talking. We have a hard time being emotionally vulnerable with each other, so I generally have no idea if we addressed my tears. I honestly remember thinking that if I told him what happened, I would be too scared to finish our road trip, so I tried my hardest to forget it until I was safe at home. The rest of that night, I didn't have a single issue with the GPS, no disappearing cars, nothing out of the ordinary. Like I said at the beginning of this post, it's been a year. I honestly may have forgotten the finer details that made this event so awful for me. All I know is what I included in this post, and it still not only makes me cry, but has me jumping at every noise in my house. Everything about the event makes my skin absolutely crawl. Please give me your theories. I'm open to anything, just curious what everyone thinks. It was such a traumatic night that I haven't felt the need to theorize or try to understand it. In the end, it doesn't really matter what really happened because I will always have the haunting memory and will probably never be in the same place. I was probably around 10 years old when this happened. My dad and I were driving down the road one afternoon in Columbus, Ohio. I remember looking out the window and seeing a large plane flying really low. If memory serves me right, it appeared really old and was maybe a military plane. We do have an Air Force base that's not far, so that would make sense. I remember being fascinated by the plane and excitedly pointing it out to my dad. He continued to drive while occasionally peeking over to look at it. After a few moments, the plane started to aggressively swerve like the pilot was losing control. Not long after, it nosedived and flew into a patch of nearby trees. I remember my dad panicking and pulling his truck over to the side of the road. We just sat there and looked out the window, but there was nothing. There was no sound of any kind, no smoke or fire, nothing. The trees didn't rustle and everything was calm. We waited, thinking that the plane was going to swerve back up and fly away, but it never emerged. I remember asking him what happened, and he was just silent. After a bit, he started driving again, and we drove over the area. We drove around for probably an hour trying to find some explanation, but there was nothing. Eventually, we headed back to my grandmother's place. We had dinner and explained to her what had happened, but she probably just thought we were crazy. I remember us eager to turn on the evening news to see if there was any mention, but still nothing. Also nothing in the paper the next day. There was no real internet yet, so this was all we had. To this day, my dad and I still discuss this. The one thing we can't remember is if the plane was making any sound at all while it was flying in the air. The radio might have been on or the windows up, we can't remember. We know for certain there was no sound from the crash. It was only about a half-mile away from us, so we would have heard something. It is like the plane literally vanished. This is the only experience I've ever had like this. I know it's a long shot, but has anyone here ever experienced something like this? I've never shared this in a public forum, so hopefully I don't appear completely crazy. There is a great comfort in knowing my dad saw the same thing. Otherwise, I would think I imagined it. This happened a long time ago. I was 12 and in my grandparents' village. We had a cow and an ox. Usually the son of the bull, usually just one, took all the cattle to graze, and at night he would take them back. Cows know where to go when going home. My grandpa had a male ox, and since my father was an adult and he wasn't there, I took the responsibility. Basically, my job was to go around the village with the ox trailing after me, calling the people to open their doors. Our ox would grunt to call the herd, and all the females came out. From then on, I had to take them to a clearing up the mountain and then later take them to the river. It was easy. The animals already knew where they were going. They were calm, and our bull was a gentle giant. All I did was ride him and had a thin rope on his horns. If any of the females wandered off, all I did was call and rare occasions poke her with a dull stick in the right direction. My grandpa said that if I see a wolf, very rare, a boar or a fox, I should stay on the ox. Not many animals dare go near an ox herd. There is a dark part of the forest where it is very quiet and even the bravest hunters won't go. It is very slippery and dangerous. They said that even the deer and boar dare not go there. I was forbidden to go there and honestly never wanted to. It was an early morning and everything seemed fine. I was on the ox going up the mountain. I was glad he let me because it was a hard trek up. I saw that one of the females was wandering off. I followed her and left our ox and the dogs go to guide the herd. She went in the forest. I ran to her and got on tying the rope on her horns. I tried steering her away, but she continued. She went in the dark part and stopped. I didn't want to get off in case she ran back and left me there. I heard a crunch and turned. A very old man was walking towards us. He looked frail with dirty clothes and a long beard. I was scared, so I laid on the ox, clinging to her, not wanting to fall if she ran. Oxen aren't like bulls. They don't jump and kick when scared. They either attack with their horns and trample or run. I was ready to hold on no matter what she chose. Our oxen don't take kindly to strangers. Before I took them out, I had to go to every house and have the ox owner introduce me to the animal. That way they saw that their owner trusts me and their herd leader, our ox, trusts me. I knew she would either attack or bolt, but she just stood there. The stranger came to us and pet her on her head, whispering something I didn't understand. He looked at me. His eyes were completely white. Then he turned around and left. He just disappeared into the trees. Suddenly, the female grunted as if they had just woken up. Our male does this noise every morning and bolted the way we came from. We found the herd. I quickly got on our ox and yelled water. He knew that command and went down towards the river. There were houses there and it was closer than home. I barged in one of the houses and tried to explain. The couple there stayed with me and sent their daughters to call my grandpa. I couldn't sleep for days remembering those white eyes. My grandparents didn't let me out of the house for gardening, and I wasn't allowed near the trees. Later I learned that they were protecting me from a lesnik, a forest spirit which can take the form of a man, an owl, or a wolf. It hates when people go in his part of the woods and can kidnap you. I later learned that the auk which took me there had fallen ill and died. It sometimes stays in the trees as an owl looking for the offender. For years, when I went to my grandparents, they wouldn't let me be alone. Not just outside, but inside too. I am never going in these woods again. I was 15 when it happened. Single boy, parents worked abroad, had the whole house to myself at night, but occasionally had help by day. High school had gotten tougher because I had just experienced one of the worst heartbreaks ever, and every day was really glum at the start of the third quarter. Day in and day out, I'd come home from school to a large empty house, 5 bedrooms, and just depressed. Some nights I'd cry myself to sleep. Time passed, and it was a week or two before finals. I was knee-deep in with studies, but time didn't really do much with the pain, since basically the reason for my heartache attended the same classes as me. Yes, I know, but I was young. Fell asleep once again, with tears. Woke up later that night and went straight to the bathroom. My room had a large glass window which is around 2 by 3 meters big. Perpendicular to the window was my study table that was stationed by the wall. I walked past this to get to the bathroom. While I took a pee, I heard a loud explosion come from the room. It sounded like a firework going off, like a large triangle, a local firework. I hurried up, finished my business, and ran back to inspect what had happened. Nothing. Everything was fine. I glanced to the right to check if maybe the sound came from outside, but the window was closed. Had a firework from outside gone off? It should have sounded muffled. It didn't. It was crisp and incredibly loud. My computer was unplugged and there was no smell of smoke, so my PSU or AVR exploding wasn't a possibility. I shook my head and thought it was nothing. Got back onto bed, and the moment my back hit the comforter, I felt multiple stabbing sensations in my back. I jumped up out of panic and pulled my comforter, only to see so many ball pens on my bed. There was a small mound of them, no caps. I was really confused. How could there be ball pens there? No one could have placed them there while I was to the bathroom. My house and yard was locked down and surrounded by 4-meter walls with spikes. With some hesitation, I took the pens and placed them on my table. Do note, my bed was beside my table. Finished moving them, and I was still stunned. It took me a moment to realize that while I was sitting on my bed thinking, the air felt much colder and I felt uneasy. Decided maybe I was just not feeling well from all the crying and went back to sleep, but this time I was sleeping on my right, facing away from the window and table. Do you people remember the sound Windows XP makes when you turn your PC on? I heard that familiar tune ring from my speakers a moment after I laid down. Funniest thing, I knew my computer was unplugged. Speakers were plugged but not my AVR, yet I could see from how much brighter the room got because my monitor was on and that blue light Windows has on its login screen that it indeed was on. Not only that, I felt this insane cold spot on my feet. I wasn't looking anywhere. I kept my eyes straight at my wardrobe. The room was already cold, but my feet felt like something freezing was touching them. I tried to turn my head a little and, from my peripheral vision, I saw it. I couldn't see all of it, but it was tall, faint, and white. Worst of all, I knew it was staring at me even if I couldn't see whatever face it had. Bolted out of my room and ran all the way to my parents' room. It was on the other end of the house. I sat there on their bed just panicking. What had just happened? What was that? I felt safe there. It was full of rosaries and a figure of Jesus. Out of nowhere, I heard a faint and slow, short pause between knocks, the type you get from good wooden walls. One after the other, the knocks grew louder and louder until they stopped and the door swung. I couldn't see anything or anyone, but I felt someone was staring at me. Turned on all the lights, the TV, and sat on the very back of the bed. Nothing happened, and I stayed up till morning. Went back to my room when the clock outside sang its 6 a.m. song and computer was not on and unplugged. My speakers were, however, on. They were a bunch of pens on my table. I knew something wrong happened last night, but I had to get ready for school, so I went to the bathroom. The moment I enter, I see my toothbrush in the middle of the bathroom. This freaked me out, and I decided to use my parents' shower instead, only going in to grab clothing. Got to school, told my friends, but I ended up getting laughed at. They told me I had stayed up late playing Counter-Strike 1.7 again and I was making up nonsense. I got home, usual time 5 p.m., and tried to go about the rest of the day. I thought I was just being insane or something. Fell asleep and woke up to the same freezing feeling. I knew someone was looking at me. I knew. The worst part of it was I read my clock when I ran out of the room. It was 3 a.m. This kept happening every night, but I realized something. I would only wake up at 3 a.m. when I slept in my room. Whenever I would sleep at my parents' room, I was fine. Woke up at the usual 5:30, no cold, no scary feeling, nothing. I decided to spend the remainder of the school year not sleeping in my room. Summer came and I traveled to my sister's house, which was 2 cities away. Spent 2/3 of my summer months just trying to forget my heartache, but most of all, my room. Went home and tried to sleep in my room on the first night back, but to no avail. I still woke up at 3, but this time I was having difficulty breathing. The next day I tried to walk around the neighborhood to look for answers. I passed by one of the houses and saw one of my mom's friends along with the others hanging out by their porch. I told them what happened. Most of them were speechless, except for 2 of them, and they told me this, directly translated to English. "My child, were you incredibly angry, bothered, or sad these past months?" I answered yes and told them I was still nurturing a heartache. One of them nodded at me and continued. "Then something followed you home. It must have been attracted to your negative energy like a cloud around you. Your room must have been drenched in all of that sadness that it stayed there and made it its lair." This revelation scared me. I was not one to believe much of folklore, but with what's happened, I knew she spoke truth. Got home as fast as I could and started planning. Went to the nearest computer cafe to read up about cleansing, and I decided to use holy water in prayer. On one Saturday, I went to the local parish with a bottle, tried to take water from one of the stone basins with holy water when a priest stopped me and asked what I was doing. He found it funny that someone who wasn't a regular, yes, I am Catholic, was getting holy water. So I told him everything. His expression turned grim. He tried to stop me from my plan, but couldn't because I wouldn't listen. So he left, but not without parting me these words. "You must be very careful with that. You do not know who, or worse, what you're dealing with." I didn't care. I was ready to fight it. Got home and entered the room. I opened the bottle and immediately splashed it around, first targeting the window. It felt like a dream, or nightmare, but as soon as I swung my fist and water came out, I felt cold. Not the normal cold, but I felt like I was frozen. I felt someone stood behind me and I heard an ungodly, gurgling scream. It was both high-pitched and low in unison. And then I felt as if every hair on my body had become frozen metal guitar strings and someone pulled them at the same time with such force. It was excruciatingly painful. I felt like my skin was coming undone. The door slammed shut on its own as I ran out. I ran to my parents' room, grabbed the keys, some money, and took 2 buses back to my sister's place. Got there, unnerved and crying. My skin was red like I had a rash all over me. People thought I had lost my mind. My sister was worried sick and thought I was on drugs. She immediately called my mom and we talked on the phone. They both agreed to let me stay there until a week before summer ended. I took every moment I could to regain myself. I couldn't sleep properly for the first few days. At the end, I went back home and was accompanied by our house help when we opened the house. We went straight for my room and tried to open it, but it was shut. Worked for a moment, but we finally got the door to budge and it was swung open. It was a mess. Everything was covered in lichen. There were mushrooms on my bed legs and wardrobe. The bed sheets looked damp. I took a step and immediately felt extremely cold. The help said she felt a strange presence staring at us. There was a crack on the window, close to where I sprayed the holy water. We immediately backed out, locked the room, and called my parents over the phone. Mom said she'll have it, my room, renovated immediately, and I was allowed to use my parents' room from now on. Time passed and people began tearing out my room. The construction workers said they would feel some sort of strange sensation and feel cold. 2 got into an accident while placing in a new floor. A few noted that they saw someone standing in the room at night. I never slept there ever again. Never. The room was locked shut. I moved out years later for college. Got a chance to fly home months back. It was locked for 10 years. Undid the locks and I re-entered it. Nothing. But I remember every day what it felt like. I couldn't recognize my room anymore. There was a large painting of Jesus placed in front of the door and some rosaries. Apart from that, nothing. I locked it once again and left. I dare not sleep in it again. My parents don't allow anyone to open it. Not even the help is allowed to. It's kept locked. Till forever. My name is Kaylee, and I am a big science believer. Not religious in any way at all. But I do accept that there are some things that science can't explain. My story starts back when I was a toddler, 3 years old. My cousin and I were very close because his mom, my auntie, or Nan, used to babysit us together while my mom was at work, and there was only a few years difference in our ages. We got on like a house on fire, and some of my earliest memories are of us playing together. I will refer to my cousin as R from here on out. Unfortunately, just before my 4th birthday, my cousin went missing. I don't want to reveal too many details about the case, but it was a huge story in the UK at the time. Most of the country was looking for this 7-year-old boy. A couple of weeks after he went missing, after my 4th birthday, he was found dead. Being 4 years old, I didn't really understand death, so when my mom had to explain to me that he was never coming back, I cried and cried. It's important to mention that my mom was pregnant with my little brother at the time. My parents moved me out of my own room into the bedroom with my 2 younger sisters to make space for the new arrival, and my mom gave birth to my brother 3 months after R's body was found. It was after I moved into my sister's room that the visits started. My cousin would come and sit on the end of my bed every night talking to me. He looked pale and silvery, kind of like how the ghosts from Harry Potter looked. I had never heard of Harry Potter at this point. It was a few years before even the first film had been released, so I couldn't have invented this up myself in my 4-year-old imagination. I remember one night I was talking with R as usual when I could sense my mom coming up the stairs. She was trying to be quiet so I wouldn't hear her, but I could feel she was there, so I pretended to be asleep so that I wouldn't be in trouble for staying awake so late. She opens the door a tiny bit. "Kaylee?" I squeeze my eyes shut, but she's not fooled. "Kaylee, who were you talking to?" I open my eyes. "R?" I tell her. "What do you mean? R isn't here anymore. He comes and visits me every night and sits on my bed talking to me. He's here at the moment, but I can't see him properly because you've opened the door and the light from the hallway is shining in on him." "Oh. Okay. Well, you need to stop talking now and get some sleep, okay? Good night." My mom leaves. She asked me about it again the next day, thinking I was just half asleep and dreaming it. But I explained to her again about the daily visits. My mom believes me, and the visits continue for years. Then, when I was maybe 6 or so, somehow my auntie found out about the visits. I don't know how she found out. All I know is that she was angry. She called me a liar and told my mom that if R was going to visit anyone, he would choose to visit her because she was his mom. That night, R came to visit me as usual, but he was sad. He told me he never meant to upset his mom by coming to see me, so the visits would have to be less often. He only came to me on birthdays and Christmas after that. The last time I saw him, I think I was around 9 years old. I had a dream, and I can still remember every detail about it to this day, 15 years later. In the dream, I was in a graveyard and I was running. Skeletons and zombies were punching their way out of graves and chasing me. I could see the gates and just kept thinking to myself, I need to get to those gates. They can't follow me out of the gates. But no matter how hard I ran, I never got any closer to the gates. I'm so scared. and about to give up and just let them take me. Then suddenly my cousin is there and I am transported, safe on the other side of the gate where the skeletons can't get to me. R looks at me and says, "I'll always be there to protect you. Never forget." And then I jolt awake. I never saw him again after that dream. Remembering it now brings me comfort, like the dream was his last goodbye to me. A few months after that dream, my mom went to visit a psychic with some friends, just for a laugh and not taking it seriously at all. The psychic told my mom that one of her children had the gift, but the psychic couldn't tell which one of the children it was. My mom, who believed my stories about R, thought it would be me who had the gift, as she knew I had déjà vu regularly and could predict things that would happen because I'd seen them before in dreams. The psychic told my mom a lot of personal things that she would have no way of knowing, as well as the fact that R was my guardian angel. That brings me some comfort too. I've considered trying to expand and refine my gift, if I have one, but to be honest, I wouldn't know where to start. Like I said, I'm a big believer in science, though I've dabbled with tarot cards, healing crystals, and dowsers in the past. If anyone has any suggestions as to how I can try to discover this power, I'd be happy to hear them. The next story starts when I'm around 6 years old, and I had invisible friends. Well, they were invisible to everyone else, anyway, but not to me. Their names were Sophie, Hannah, Jessica, Megan, and either Amelia or Amanda, which I forget. I vividly remember one time playing Ring Around the Rosie with them in the backyard, holding hands and skipping in a circle. My mom has no memory of me ever having invisible friends, despite in my head I remember talking about them regularly and my mom watching me through the window on the Ring of Rosies day. They were only around for a few months, maybe a year before I stopped seeing them. Fast forward a few more years to high school, and I make some new friends who remain my friends all the way through school and into college. Some of those friends I still keep in touch with now. My friends' names, Sophie, Hannah, Jessica, Megan, and both an Amanda and Amelia. Sure, I could have imagined up these invisible friends, and it could just be a coincidence. They're all popular names, right? Well, let me tell you this. At my primary school, I knew one Sophie and one Hannah, both of whom were horrible to me. So if I had imagined the invisible friends, I wouldn't have chosen those names. I had never met a Jessica before and have never even heard the names Amelia or Amanda before, so I definitely wouldn't have chosen those. Megan is my sister's name, so there is no way I would have picked that either. It's definitely weird. How could I possibly have imagined up so many friends and predicted my future friends' names? It still creeps me out a little bit now. The third and final story I will share happened less than a year ago. This did not happen to me, but it did happen to my mom. My mom is a carer for the elderly, and they were having a garden party at work to celebrate the royal wedding. Everyone was outside, and one of my mom's colleagues decided to take a photo. After the photo was taken, they noticed a shape in the window that looked unmistakably like someone waving at the camera. There was no one in the building at the time. Everyone was outside. The window was open, so there's no way it could have been a reflection in the glass. And, weirdest of all, my mom swears the face looks exactly like an old man she was caring for who had died in that building a week before the photo was taken. As some of you probably know, in South America during the 70s and 80s, there were military coups on most countries, Chile, Argentina, and Brazil. The Uruguayan one was from 73 to 85. Punta Carretas is a big building that was used as a jail since 1915, but during that dictatorship period mentioned, it was used primarily as a high-risk penitentiary for political guerrilla fighters. It's not a myth, but a fact that there were atrocious tortures performed to the inmates there, and a lot of disappearances, meaning the military ended them and hid their bodies, which have not been found even today. In 1971, there was a huge escape of 100 inmates, among them the famous Pepe Mujica, which was elected president in 2010. After the return of the democracy in the country, the jail was closed and reopened after a remodel in 1994 as a shopping center. Now, those of us that believed in the paranormal can only imagine the dark energy contained in those walls as a result of its story. A jail in which tortures were performed becoming a shopping center, which isn't also the friendliest environment, absorbs a lot of negative energy, anger, fear, pain, envy, and that generates paranormal activities. I worked there as a security guard for a year and a half and can testify that the place is definitely haunted. The first story. The 2.5 bathroom. There is a mezzanine in the mall between the second and third floor where some weird stuff happens. You see, to reach the bath, you must go through a hall that looks exactly like a jail hallway would look. In the entrance of that hall, the walls shrink weirdly from an architectural point of view, suggesting that there was a huge, heavy door there in the past. And it makes sense since a lot of people say that the bathroom was used as a torture room during its jail period. A friend that worked in the mall as a cleaner told me that the bathroom was the only place in the entire building that wasn't cleaned at nights when it was closed to the public, since there were numerous laboral accidents and you could feel a dense atmosphere. He also told me there was once a time where someone attempted to end their life in the bathroom. One guy tried to cut his own throat in front of the mirror. Story 2. The fire. The shopping center had been on fire many times. 5 times in the last 18 years, in 2000, 2010, 2013, and 2016, and 2018. Each of them were originating in proximity to the bathroom mentioned in the last point, and on neither were there official explanations to the origin of this fire. Number 3. The cat. When I was working there, once I was assigned to the parking space on the second basement. Since it's a big place and I was alone, I was given a bicycle to do the rounds. Easy job. Just checked for suspects around the customers' cars, make sure they would park correctly, and inform the authorities in case of accidents. One day, at night, I saw a cat in there, and it was kind of weird. I don't know how to explain, even in Spanish, but there was something about the cat that seemed off. Its way of walking, the way it looked at me, the expression of its face. I don't know, but I felt the urge to follow it. It was close, and I was on a bike, but when I approached where it should be, I couldn't find it anywhere. Immediately I felt the ambience chill and felt sad for no apparent reason, but the story doesn't end there. A few days later I saw it again and thought, this time I'll get you, and moved as fast as I could, but the cat went under a parked car. I saw it perfectly going under the car, but when I checked, it wasn't there. Again, I felt unexplainable chills and sadness. I even asked a couple of customers that were just in front of me if they saw where the cat went, but they didn't answer and looked at me as if I was crazy. Now, to the point, I didn't know if there could be any animal ghosts, but after that, I am sure that is what I saw. Maybe it was killed on accident before and its spirit kept lurking in that basement. I'll never know. Number 4. Another time I was in another parking space. This time this one was outdoors. The weekend day was relatively uneventful, until I heard something through the radio, some static. It was in Spanish, but it was in fact part of the Our Father prayer, and forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. My reaction was immediately asking, what? Who said that? To which my manager answered immediately not to mention it and forget about it. Now, I should mention that around here, security guards are not like the ones you see in movies. We're not trained specialists, and in fact, we didn't carry firearms or anything like that. We were just a bunch of kids on an easy job while studying and a few police veterans looking for some extra income, meaning that we did some jokes from time to time through the radio, but but never something like that. And the voice I heard had a certain eerie sound to it, with a certain rumble and echo, like the way your voice sounds from a cave or church. Well, those are my experiences concerning this particular place of my city. I don't work there anymore, as I graduated and am working in something different, but every time I go to that mall, specifically at night when going to the cinema, I remember those things that happen to me and get chills. My father passed when I was 6 years old and had been sick for 2 years prior to passing, so I had very few precious memories of him. My mom would fill in these things here and there, stories of him and his adventurous soul as I got older. I was the youngest by far of 4 girls, so I was the only one that didn't know him well. Maybe because of those questions and stories, I kind of heard things about him the other sisters didn't know of his past. One story told to me when I was around 15 or so, laughingly during a "have you ever had any paranormal events happen to you" kind of thing. She repeated this to me a time or two later as well. My father, her and my eldest sister, who was 1 year old, was living in an old house in some state. This was the early 1960s. House was isolated. Well, there was a reported prison break nearby, so my mom expected he was worried and led to this event. That night he sat up in bed, wide awake, and said, "Ethel," and woke her up. She was alarmed because he was so still and staring at the foot of the bed. "What?" she said. "Did you see them?" he whispered. His eyes were steady and wide. He didn't look asleep. He wasn't prone to do anything like sleepwalking or talking in his sleep. "See what?" "There are 3 little green men at the foot of the bed staring at me." Well, there wasn't, of course. She snorted, and she told him no, there wasn't. He said that they were just staring at him, and then he said they were gone. Lasted about 2 minutes. Now, my father had a few events happen in his life that had been weird, but my mom and I never. So that was a funny dad story to me, and we laughed. The 3 little green men. Now, fast forward, my son is 11 years old and very sick with bronchial asthma. He has had so many bouts of this all of his young life, and this one to me was slightly worse than others. A visit to the hospital, breathing treatments, a fever. About 2 months later, we were chatting and he said, "Yeah, I thought I was going to die that night, Mom." "You weren't that bad off, sweetie," I said. Very seriously, he said, "I thought I was, mostly when I saw the 3 little green men. They were beside the bed just staring at me. One was playing the drums." All I could do was look at him. My mouth gaped. He knew nothing of his grandfather's story. I called my mom and told her, and she was just as flabbergasted as I was. My son is now in his 30s and nothing else has happened. But he has sons, and I'm keeping my ears open. To set this bizarre experience up, I'm going to have to preface this with the fact that I've always been what I would describe as skeptical but wary when it comes to anything strange or otherworldly. So even though I am easily spooked, I have no problem chalking it up to something reasonable 99% of the time. However, I'm not sure what to think of this one. Late night as per usual, my husband and I go to bed around 10 or 11. We had a little bit of a heated argument, but we got through it and fell asleep together peacefully. Probably a few hours later, I wake up to the sensation of cat claws kneading my head. No biggie, we have 2 cats, and I've caught the older one trying to steal my spot on my pillow more than once, so I wasn't surprised or anything. I pushed him away and tried to go back to sleep. A few minutes later, I feel it again. Once more, I push him off and try to go back to bed. I feel some commotion and rustling on the extra pillows behind me and assume that our younger cat, he's about 8 months, bright white and orange, we'll call him L, is bothering the older cat. Gray fur, white triangle on face, we'll call him B, after getting into his catnip toy again. For reference, as of right now, I'm laying on the right side of the pillow and I feel a heavy weight on the upper left side of the pillow, roughly matching the weight of B, the older cat. So when I look up to separate them, I expect to see the teen kitty, L, farther back behind my head and taunting our older cat next to me as usual. Wrong. I turn my head to look back and I'm staring at B, back by the headboard. I look to see who's next to me because L is drastically skinnier and lighter than B and barely sinks into any pillows we have. B is a chunky boy. I'm staring at another gray cat, roughly the same size and looks like B, sitting right next to my face and staring at B. I've never seen this cat before in my life. We don't have a third cat, and there's no possible way another cat got inside as we are on the second floor with all entries to our home locked and sealed at night, and it's winter. Here's where it gets strange. The presence of this third cat did not bother me. Like it didn't even register to me that there, for lack of a better term, was a doppelganger of B 2 inches from my face, and B didn't seem worried either. Although they looked identical, so B could have been the one next to me regardless. Both cats seemed peaceful. I roll over, not even freaking registering this strange new cat, and drift off for what seems like only a minute before feeling the cat shift on the pillows above me. I wake up in time to see them jump off the bed, one chasing the other, and for some reason I put out my hand to touch it. It was like a weird lure almost. Horrible, horrible idea. I touch this cat and am jarred with the worst feeling I've ever experienced. It felt like absolute raw dread and terror. It was like a hyper version of your gut telling you something is very wrong over and over. Upon touching the cat, I also experienced seeing something, which I didn't want to add to this because it makes me look like a crazy person. Throughout my life, I've always been pretty healthy mentally and physically, truly blessed that way. But I'm hoping maybe someone has seen it as well. It was like a seal, a rune, or insignia, not sure what the word I'm looking for, that had a freaky-looking lionish creature in the middle. I only saw it for about half a second in my vision when I touched the cat. I'm trying desperately to chalk this creepy thing up to me waking up and it being just a remnant of a quick dream since I did nod off. And as soon as I touched the cat, it was gone. Poof, into midair. I would love to think I was dreaming or it was sleep paralysis, but I was very awake and I could move and do things. I could get up if I wanted to. Nothing matches up. So if anyone has any insight, let me know because I really would love to know what the heck I just saw. This is going into detail regarding a sequence of paranormal events. I've been searching for answers for as long as I can remember, but it's impossible to discern the genuineness of anything on the internet, and unfortunately most of it's like me, someone seeking answers. When I was too young to remember, my mom told me I only ever slept in complete darkness, with the door shut and everything. She said I would talk to someone. One of my first memories is telling her I can't speak to the angels anymore, and suddenly felt confused with an odd feeling I shouldn't have done that. I was confused because it was like a message without sound. I just knew. Ever since then, I've been terrified of the dark. I don't know why. I'm a bit disturbed of the darkness these days, but back then I couldn't even tolerate it. One day I just stopped sleeping in my room altogether. It was easier to sleep in the living room, and my mom even started sleeping out there with me. This is around 2005. At our last house, we've moved in around 2007, I had a terrifying experience. It was 2008 and I was alone in the living room since at the time I didn't sleep in a room and we lived in a smaller house. My mom was sleeping in her room this time around and I was alone. It was sudden, but something woke me up. At first I thought it was strange how I jolted out of my sleep and didn't feel the least bit exhausted, and I'm not a morning person either. It was around 3:30 a.m. at the time. I was sleeping adjacent to the kitchen. My head was hanging over the armrest of the couch as a pillow facing into the hallway. For some reason, the hall light was off, even though I always left it on. This bothered me. The bathroom light was on though, so my brother must have turned the hall light off since his room was next to the hall light and left the bathroom light on, though the bathroom door was closed. I started to relax again and fell back to sleep. Suddenly, something started poking the back of my head, which disturbed me. At first, I thought it was my imagination because I almost drifted back to sleep, so I tried to ignore it. It happened again in an identical manner as before. It felt definitely real at this point that someone was poking the back of my head with 2 fingers, back and forth in an intent manner. At this point I was awake, so I couldn't just brush it off as my imagination the second time around, so I sank into the couch and slowly turned around. There was an older, middle-aged man staring bitterly at me. I could see his face through the bathroom light protruding through the top of the door, and for some reason he looked familiar, but I'm not sure why. After a few seconds, he started walking towards me, which terrified me, and all I could do was desperately sink down as fast as I could into the couch I was on, hoping somehow the layer of blanket would protect me. I thought about yelling, but I couldn't find my voice, and I was afraid I'd make him angry and he would run toward me to shut me up. He seemed so real. For all I knew, he could have been an intruder, but the whole situation felt unnatural. He got to the end of the hallway where my head was previously facing, and he suddenly looked away from me into the kitchen behind me to my left. Even though I was terrified, I honestly wanted to know what he was looking at. So I looked into the kitchen, and there was this woman. She seemed relatively young, with white clothes on, and she was just staring at him with an unamused look on her face. Suddenly she flew through the living room, stomping like a rampaging animal, and effortlessly shoved him through the hallway and into the bathroom. What really had me thinking was the hall light turned on. Now, I've seen weird, unexplainable things my whole life, and I almost always brushed it off as my imagination, but nothing physical like this has ever really happened before. And suddenly the atmosphere lightened up and the ambient noise returned, which I hadn't even noticed until that moment. It was really unsettling. It was a bit disappointing when I stayed up later that night and told my mom about the instance, and she told me I was dreaming, even if I was clearly awake. Fast forward a bit. About 8 years ago in 2011, we moved into our house. For the first few months, there were issues where the doors would sort of just lock themselves, particularly when nobody was in the house. On one occasion, my parents were on the porch, so knowing the issues they were having with the doors, they decided to leave the door cracked, thinking it might have been an issue with the locking mechanism itself. The glass door was a little rusty and it needed to be greased, so opening and closing it required a little effort to say the least. Somehow the door slammed shut and locked them out. The doors continued to be an issue for about 6 months after we moved in, but eventually it just stopped. It was around this time when I was home alone. I was using the master bathroom because it was the first time we ever had a very nice master bathroom such as itself, and I liked using it for that reason. Now I was starting to get used to the house, so I wasn't too bothered by the fact that I was home alone. I personally always got the creeps whenever I went into that bathroom, and it didn't help my mother, and even my skeptical father felt the same way. There was a large closet adjacent to the master bathroom, which at the time we didn't use for much, but would later be used for storage. Something about that closet made me feel uneasy, but I didn't think much of it. It must have been all the empty space, I thought. It had one of those bright office-looking fluorescent lights. It flickered and made a loud buzzing noise which added to the unsettling atmosphere. I walked into the door to the bathroom through the master bedroom and I froze in place because There was this young guy just standing there at the end of the bathroom by the obscured bathroom window next to the closet door. I looked into his eyes and I immediately hightailed it out of there. I didn't go into the bathroom for 3 months. I mean, unless someone joined me in there to look around. I told my mom and she looked at me, startled. She said she'd seen the same thing. A young guy, probably 19. He was relatively tall, 6 foot. His eyes looked bloodshot, but I couldn't really tell because he was so far away. Now, over the years, we've renovated the house and he seems to have gotten friendlier. Maybe he likes what we've done, or he's gotten used to us, or a combination of both. We would often see him just standing around, staring at us. My sister often said she would wake up and see a guy standing across the room staring at her. He would always leave, just phase through the wall whenever she saw him. Now, we never really told my brother because he was a hardcore skeptic, so talking about it with him was sure to be met with an attitude. He's agnostic and he rarely talked about the phenomena. So one night, around 10 p.m., he woke up and saw a dude just staring at him in the room. I was in the living room with my mom watching TV and we heard him yell. We thought he was asleep, but we guessed he was playing Call of Duty or something. Lo and behold, he came out startled and told us he woke up to some dude standing next to his bed staring at him. When he yelled, he just backed through the wall. Now, my dad rarely mentions the phenomena, but he's mentioned hearing strange sounds coming from the bathroom closet, considering he's literally adjacent to it from where he sleeps. My mom apparently agreed with him, saying she's heard it too. He almost always sleeps with the bathroom door shut, too, because of the quote-unquote vibes he gets from leaving it open. Like you're being stared at. But I don't think he's negative. My mom thinks he's maybe troubled, but he can be relatively friendly. One time I was on my computer. It was late at night and it was dark in the room and I wasn't up to much. As weird as it sounds, I started waving my arms in the air for absolutely no reason. Just waving them like I just don't care because of that song. You know the song? Anyways, I stopped and the screen turned dark, and I saw someone standing behind me waving their arms around, like a wacky, wavy, inflatable arm tube man, so I turned around and nobody was there. And it freaked me out, to say the least, but I also laughed about it since it was so quirky. The only problem is we don't think he's the only one here. Apparently everyone's in agreement there's another dark figure lurking in the background. My mom and I on occasion have woken up to a choking sensation with concussive-type symptoms. It would often occur in episodes, occurring for a week or two at the time, then stop for a few weeks or even months, and it's only ever me or her at any given night. Personally, it would often be joined by an unusual dream. I can't say much for her, since she refuses to talk about them in detail. But it would often be relatively normal for me. But the dream would slowly start to deteriorate. I would start getting confused. I would have trouble thinking in the dream, and there would always be this shadow person there. If I looked at him, I suddenly would be attacked. It would lunge at me and sort of take over. My limbs would go limp, and I would start shaking uncontrollably. I feel lethargic, and there are all of these illiterate or disturbing thoughts in my head that don't make any sense. There would be this warping sensation or sound. It's difficult to explain, and my neck would start to feel twisted. I would have trouble breathing, and my sight would begin to fade. Then I would suddenly wake up with a choking sensation and intense fear, sometimes shaking in bed with the feeling that something was crawling off of me. But I rarely see anything, and when I do, it's just a dark shadow. My mom's described having these same experiences, but we never have them on the same nights, and it only occurs when we sleep at night or late in the evening. This is why I refuse to sleep at night. I can't, and I always fall asleep around 8 a.m. For some reason, it's the only way to stop the night terrors, or whatever they are. I worked in an oldish university built in the early 20th century in Germany. The 4-story building is situated at some kind of hill, so most of it is above ground level. But we also have a huge basement with barely any light coming through the small windows, but some easy accessible exits. It's not possible to enter the building through it, though. There are many ways to get from below the ground level floor, and there are some ways that I usually avoid once the sun is down. You see, I study archaeology, and we have a huge collection of plaster casts of famous Roman and Greek artworks. And once it's dark, like dark, it becomes unsettling and I feel watched pretty quickly. So I just avoid the rooms filled with plaster casts and everything is fine. So much for the setting. So I worked on one Saturday night evening last summer in my office, which happens to be in the basement as well. At about 8 p.m., I get a strange feeling of being lonely. So I leave my office and look around the building for anyone else to chat up and get a little break. I get up the stairs on my usual route, but there was nobody around. That's not too uncommon for that time of day on a weekend, so I decide to walk around a bit in our library and then get back to work. Once I enter the library, I notice growling thunder and the rooms light up by the lightning. After that, it becomes dark. The clouds darken the building as if it's becoming night. That was unsettling, but I know myself. I get creeped out by every little thing because I watch so many horror movies. No big deal, I think to myself, and go back to my office through one of the rooms with the plaster casts. I don't know why I changed my usual route and went through one of those rooms. Once I'm downstairs, I notice a weird sound. The storm is continuing with thunderbolts every few moments, but another very strange sound joins the scenery. It was a metallic sound. The first image that came to my mind was someone hitting a knife against a metal wall. It was raining. I didn't think much of it. It's an old building. Sounds happen. I continued to walk to my office, but then I noticed that the sound was coming closer to me. Still no big deal. Sound travels. I might become scared and start imagining things. Once I get to my office, the feeling of being watched becomes unbearable. The sound comes closer and closer. It sounded like it was just around the corner. So I packed my things and ran off as fast as I could. I am going to die was the only thought I had in that moment, and I had to get out. I never experienced that kind of feeling, and it creeped me out more than anything else. The exit to the building is right next to my office. Once I am out, the feeling became even stranger. I looked at the building and noticed that the window of our elevator lit up. There was nobody there. There couldn't be anyone there. The building was closed. Only a few people had access, and there was nobody there just a few moments ago. I would have noticed if someone came in. Why use the elevator anyways? It's not an elevator for transportation of people, but for our plaster casts. Everyone just uses the stairs, especially the people that I know have a key to the building. That's when I noticed that not only there wasn't anyone in the building that I knew of, but there was nobody outside either. I know it was raining. Why be outside with that kind of weather? But somehow I knew I was alone. Not alone by the building, but alone. I'm not superstitious. I know when I'm freaked out because of my psyche playing tricks on my mind. In that moment, I could have sworn that I was the only person on Earth. It was like the whole world wasn't moving anymore, and there was a huge street on my building. Even that was empty. The feeling of being watched didn't go away, but I wasn't as afraid anymore. Some friends wanted to hang out later that evening, so I was waiting for them to pick me up like we planned in the morning. The whole time I could barely move, and I couldn't take my eyes off that elevator. Once they arrived, I noticed that I must have stood there for about an hour, but what felt like a few minutes. As I jumped into their car as quickly as I could, everything went back to normal. Suddenly, there were cars on the road. Sounds. There was no sound except the thunder and the sound of raindrops hitting the floor before, and it came back to normal. I must have looked like I've seen death. My friends were really concerned. The next day I went back with a colleague of mine and we tried out every possibility to recreate the sound I heard. We hit different metal objects with other metal objects, but it wasn't possible to recreate. Everything sounded way deeper than that sound I heard and more natural. I asked all the other people working in that building who had a key to the elevator and who could have been there the night before, but no, nobody was there except for me. They have no reason to lie to me. Some of them are even my teachers. To this day, all of this doesn't make any sense. I know myself. I have never felt that kind of fear, the basic instinct of get out now. So I wanted to ask if any of you have had some kind of explanation, be it either a psychological or paranormal one. As I said, the building is very old. It has seen World War II. It has seen many depressed students. I wish I could make some sense out of this situation because it felt so wrong and different than anything I've ever experienced. And believe me, I'm a huge baby, so I imagine things quite often, and I get the bad feeling that this wasn't just one of my creepy fantasies. In late 2014, my sister was driving my mom's old 2005 Chevy Malibu with her dog in a kennel in the front passenger seat. She's driving down a dark back road at night on her way to her house in the next town over. It's 11 p.m. on, I think, a Thursday. I'm still awake. I'm sure there was no school the next day. My other sister is in her room and my brothers aren't home. My mom comes out of her room and starts to go to the door. She asks me, "I'm going to drive with your sister and make sure she gets home safe. Do you want to come with me?" I said no as I was watching some show on Nick at Night. My mom walks out the door and she drives off. After maybe 40 minutes, my mom calls our house phone. I pick it up when I see her number. She's very frantic and says while crying, "I won't be home for a couple of hours. Your sister's car rolled over." I don't remember exactly what she said over the phone, but she explained to me and I told my sister. Meanwhile, my mom is speeding down this dark road trying to find where my sister is. My sister didn't know where she was when she crashed. It was a cold November night. My mom is driving so fast, she sees flashing red and blue lights in her mirror. She gets pulled over and explains she needs to get to her daughter. She had called the police earlier to search the roads for her, and this was one of the cops. After the officer understands and lets her go, he drives off. My mom continues to sit there on the side of the road, crying into her arms on the steering wheel. She stops crying when she sees a white Pontiac Firebird pull up beside her. The windows roll down, and there is a man. Long, well-kept brown hair, thin face, a little hair on his chin, and blue eyes. He asked her if she needed help, if she was okay. She saw his eyes and immediately felt safe. He offered to help her look for her daughter. She hadn't even said anything about her yet, but my mom accepted. She trusted him as if she knew him her whole life. She got in his car and they drove. He held her hand and told her everything would be all right. "Your daughter will be safe, don't worry. Don't worry. It'll all be fine." She said his voice was so soothing. She continued to look into his eyes, which she said seemed to still shine even in the dark of night. They drove until they came across the wreckage. My mom gets out of the car and runs to her, both crying, my sister holding her dog tight. Police arrive only shortly after, and my sister gets put in an ambulance and sent to the hospital along with her dog. My mom cries in relief and goes to find the man that drove her to tell him thank you. Instead, she finds her SUV parked exactly where the man dropped her off. She stands there, then gets into her car and drives off. Weeks later, my mom asked my sister if she saw a white Pontiac Firebird drop her off or the man. She says no, and that, "You just got there, got out of your car and ran to me. I didn't see anyone else but you." My mom believes this was Jesus guiding her, keeping her calm. Jesus was her guardian angel that night. My mom's side of the family is very religious, and I find comfort in the thought that my mom had Jesus as her guardian angel then. I also wonder what would have happened if I had agreed to go in the first place. I guess I'll never know. My sister ended up getting many stitches. She wasn't seriously injured, had a huge gash in her right elbow. Her dog, a Shih Tzu named Delilah, was fine, but she had some form of PTSD since then. Every night she would cry in her sleep. 1 year later, she passed away of parvo. It's a painful disease for a dog, and I hate that she had to go like that. She was happy. She was always in front of the door, jumping every time I got home from school. One day she wasn't there. Found her in the laundry room laying down. I knew something was wrong. I told my mom, and we found out she was sick. She was a great dog, and I loved her. I don't know what heaven would be like, but I would like to think she's up there running and jumping around through those big, golden gates. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/Let's Read Official, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and yeet ha.